All right, we can go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone. This is a webinar hosted by the Economic Innovation Group in partnership with the Opportunity Investment Consortium of Indiana. If folks aren't familiar with the Economic Innovation Group, I just wanted to share very quickly at the top, we are a bipartisan policy think tank located in Washington, D.C. We really work on policies and do research that is oriented towards expanding opportunity by offering solutions that really empower investors and entrepreneurs throughout the nation to drive capital and human talent to the most distressed communities. And we're very excited to present this current webinar as part of a broader offering on opportunity zones that we've been doing over the past year and a half. This is a really special webinar because I'm excited to announce that this morning we have released a new report called Delivering Opportunity, a diagnostic and strategy playbook to maximize Indiana's opportunity zones. Before you head over to check it out, we wanted to host this discussion with a few key stakeholders to provide an overview of the report and add additional context to opportunity zones activities that has already occurred in Indiana thus far, and how that information that we are providing in this report is relevant to current efforts underway to spur growth and prosperity in the state. For those who don't know me, my name is Rachel Riley. I'm the Director of Impact Strategy at Economic Innovation Group. And I'm joined by my colleague, Kenan Fikri, who will pop up pretty shortly here. And we are very excited to have a real all-star panel of guest speakers. Emily Scott from LISC Indianapolis, who's also representing the Opportunity Investment Consortium of Indiana, Nathan Ringham from Central Indiana Corporate Partnership, and Matt Gaddis from House Investments. Next slide. So before I turn it over to Kenan, just wanted to run through the agenda very quickly. So at the top, we're going to talk about the project context. So this project is not happening in a vacuum. It's part of a larger initiative happening throughout the state. And so we're both going to talk about how the project came to be and the reason behind it, as well as the broader initiative in Indiana. Then we're going to talk about the different components of the report itself, as well as our findings, elevating the key findings of the report, and then the application. So how we're hoping the report and the information will actually be used and go to ground. And then we're going to hear from some local opportunity zone stakeholders and what I think are local experts to really ground the information that we have in practice. And of course, we're going to have time at the end for Q&A. And so you'll see a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So feel free throughout the presentation to pop any questions you have in there, and then we'll have time to answer them. What I'll do is I will, if it's not already in there, put a link to the report in the chat box so you guys will have access to that after the webinar. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Kenan.
Okay, thank you, Rachel, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So I'll start by giving you a little context about how this project fits in the broader grand scheme of things. So here, we being at the kind of center of the opportunity zones universe as the group that originally conceived the idea and then has done a lot of work to both get it passed into legislation and then stood up as a policy when it comes to regulations and all on the federal side. We have also ventured into really helping to help guide communities, guide states, guide private sector leaders, philanthropies, really anyone who could be involved in the OZ process to figure out how they can get engaged to take something that could just be an arcane provision of the tax code and translate it into real actionable and meaningful impact on the ground in the communities the kind of federal tax incentive financing tool is meant to unlock. So we were really lucky to have the chance to be invited to go to ground in the state of Indiana. It's the first state that EIG, as a relatively young think tank, we're 3 years old, or excuse me, 5 years old. The first state where we've gone to ground to do a really exhaustive local study and then a deep kind of interview process with local stakeholders, and then come up with a kind of tailor-made strategy agenda for the state, but one that is also, transferable to, I think, many different communities across the country, and speaks to, again, all different types of stakeholders, from public sector leaders to private sector leaders, and nonprofit folks as well. So we worked really closely with the with the LISC Indianapolis office. You'll hear from them later today as the representatives and kind of the core team staffing the Opportunity Investment Consortium of Indiana, which itself is a public-private partnership and collaboration that was started as a result of OZs being enacted into law to coordinate locally. So we're extremely grateful for them kind of serving as our ambassadors and a real node on the ground that shared their network with us, so we could hear from all the most important players in the state. And then we relied on lots of different data sources that we're familiar with at the federal level, and benefited from a bunch of data shared by the Indiana University Business Research Center there on some local insights into zoning and things. So we'll present some of that in a moment. And then many folks on this call also actively contributed input to the report. So we're very grateful for that. And we this initiative kind of fits into a broader project that the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership is sponsoring called the GPS project, Indiana GPS project, that is designed to help the state of Indiana map a future that of a just dynamic, prosperous economy with good jobs, with strong communities, and with innovative advanced industry base. And Opportunity Zones is nested amid a couple other products that I think Nathan, who also invited us or who represents the group that invited us formally into Indiana to do this study, we'll talk about on the next slide. So I'll go ahead and actually with that segue and kick it over to him. So thanks, Nathan.
Yeah, thanks, Kenan, and thanks EIG and everyone at the Opportunity Investment Consortium, and to all the participants for joining today's webinar. We're really excited to finally be able to publicly share this Delivering Opportunity report. So we're fortunate enough to have EIG work on. As Kenan mentioned, my name is Nathan Ringham, and I am with the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership. For folks unfamiliar with CICP, we were founded about 20 years ago as a means to bring together the chief executives of Central Indiana's most prominent corporations, foundations, and universities in a strategic and collaborative effort dedicated to the region's continued prosperity. Of the past 20 years or so, we've mostly been known through our branded initiatives, AgriNovus, Ascend, BioCrossroads, Connexus, ESN, and TechPoint, each of which carry out a range of activities across the state to advance their sectors of the economy. As Kenan just mentioned, CICP is in the midst of a statewide project, the Indiana GPS project, with the support of the Lilly Endowment and with help from nationally leading think tanks, the Brookings Institution, the American Enterprise Institute, and of course, EIG. EIG's report on delivering opportunity is a significant element of this work, in that opportunity zones serve as an important place-based tool to further strategic investments around the state. Through the Indiana GPS project more broadly, we're looking for ideas to bolster the state's advanced industries and improve job quality. Our project began before the current pandemic, but that's frankly brought to the fore many of the economic pre-existing conditions that the state faces. One of these is lagging productivity in our advanced industries, which are STEM and R&D intensive industries that play an outsized role in Indiana's economy. They employ 10% of all workers and are responsible for 25% of the state's GDP, 60% of the state's exports, and nearly all of the state's patent and innovation activity. But more importantly, they pay wage premiums for workers of all education levels and spur additional job creation through long supply chains and multiplier effects that boost local serving industries like hospitality, healthcare, and education. All told, more than 1 million direct and indirect jobs are tied to the state's advanced industries, which are present in all corners of Indiana. But as I mentioned, they've been shedding their productivity advantage in recent years, which raises uncomfortable questions about their long-term prospects and the long-term prospects of the 1 million+ jobs associated with them. And as many on this webinar also know, the state has far too few good jobs. And this is something that our colleagues at the Brookings Institution are looking at closely, building on their past work, which defines a good job as one that pays a family-sustaining wage and comes with employer-sponsored health care. According to our Brookings colleagues, nearly 60% of Indiana's jobs fail to clear the good job threshold, meaning only 40% of fellow Hoosiers have a good job. More generally, between 2007 and 2017, low-paying jobs were the primary drivers of employment growth within the state, while middle wage jobs were generally lost. This trend is, of course, being underscored by the K-shaped recovery that we're currently going through as the economy continues to grapple with the COVID-19 public health crisis. In the weeks ahead, we'll be releasing more information on these topics, and you can follow our work at a website that will go live today, indianagpsproject.com. It's what you see a picture of on your screen right now. But for now, it's important to note that opportunity zones can play an important role in furthering efforts to bolster advanced industries and boost job quality, both of which are mentioned in EIG's new report. And they can, of course, opportunity zones can also, of course, be leveraged to further placemaking investments, quality of life enhancements, and other efforts that are really vital to attracting and retaining talent and businesses that ensure the state's long-term economic prosperity. So with that, I want to turn it back over to my friends at EIG, who can share more about their newly released report.
Okay, yeah, thanks so much for that great introduction, Nathan, and again for being a really terrific partner on this project. Nathan spoke to one of the reasons why we were so excited to engage on this initiative, and it's really because it gave us a chance to articulate, I think for the first time in the opportunity zone space, exactly how, and in some cases where already, opportunity zones can further these, these critical economic development goals of building a more advanced and inclusive good jobs economy. For those of you who are new to opportunity zones, well, I'll start with for those of you who know opportunity zones well, or think that you may. Much of the conversation thus far has been relatively limited to potential real estate applications, or kind of the known universe of the first order kind of simplest direct applications of this new federal community development incentive. But it's so open-ended, opportunity zones, that it's kind of hard to grasp all the different applications without a guidebook or a map kind of laying those out and laying out exactly how, if you have the priority of building a more entrepreneurial economy, how and where OZ financing can fit. So I look forward to expounding on all that here with you now. And I will say that if you need a tutorial on opportunity zones itself, on what the heck this thing is, or where did I find myself this morning, I encourage you to go to eig.org/opportunity zones, where there are a whole bunch of resources, and we can break out the specifics of how the tax incentive works, etc. This report doesn't really cover that, and we won't go too in depth on that here. We're going to assume a baseline level knowledge, but there are lots of great resources, many of which my colleague Rachel has led the development of, that are available there online. So what did we do to hopefully help deliver opportunity in the state? So we ended up first kind of baselining economic conditions across the neighborhoods that are now opportunity zones, and then eligible for these this federally kind of capital gains tax incentive favored type of equity investment. And then we decided to try to refine opportunity zones based on the different types of communities that find themselves with the status. So based on residential areas, or downtowns, or commercial or industrial land, in part to help communities better contextualize their opportunity zones and better understand what the local investment opportunities may be, or how they may be best positioned to take advantage of this tool. And also to help investors better understand, where particular investment opportunities might be found across the state's OZs. And this is really important, right? If you have a primarily residential opportunity zone, you might want to put in place a different set of tools and guides or rules and regulations kind of for incoming investment. That might not apply for if you're really just looking at an industrial district adjacent to an infrastructure, an airport or a port or something like that. So I think understanding the types of communities that are OZs will help inform and refine the kind of complementary layers of policy that communities can layer on top. And then we aligned with many of the kind of local needs and priorities lined out in the broader GPS project to build that advanced economy to help create strong and healthy and stable communities, and then laid out some data supporting each one of those, kind of teeing up the need case, and then what opportunities zones can do to help, and where this specific economic development tool might be able to play a role. And that gets into the areas of opportunity there. And then my colleague Rachel will bring us through the baseline and current community engagement and investment activity in the state, and then what some strategies might be for you all to consider to really amplify the great activity that's already happening in the state and just make the most of this thing. And that's another, we were really pleased to discover upon taking the magnifying glass to the state that in many ways Indiana is already a national leader in making the most of OZs, in setting up kind of supportive community-based infrastructure, especially around the Opportunity Investment Consortium of Indiana, and in just seeing all the different diverse applications of OZs play out across the state, from brownfield development to clean tech company growth to affordable housing, to historic preservation. It's all there in the various corners of the state, and it's really neat to see all that have happened organically already, and we really hope that this product will help accelerate and build off of all that promise in communities of all sizes across the state. So next slide, please. So in total, more than 500,000 Hoosiers live in the state's 156 opportunity zones. So OZs are census tracts, so they're neighborhoods, usually several blocks, several blocks that have about 4,000 to 8,000 people each. The central region, there around Indianapolis, has the largest number of zones and the largest population in those zones. But you can see that every corner of the state has a number of opportunity zones, and the state was really thoughtful in making sure that kind of the strongest and most prime communities for this type of incentive were nominated to become zones in each set of regions in the state. And here you can see that even though they all had to meet baseline layers of poverty rates and low median family incomes to qualify as an opportunity zone, there's some real diversity in conditions. That typical median family income in an OZ in the West Central region is much higher than it is in the Northwest region, for example. And poverty rates differ pretty significantly between the Southern region and again, the Northwest region, which is generally the hardest, most struggling of all the ones in the state, which will probably come as no surprise to you. So next slide, please. Yeah, in general, if you look across statistics, I think and this is even pre-pandemic, there's a really compelling need case here for new tools and new approaches to begin to bridge really local place-based economic opportunity divides. Statewide, Indiana has a pretty low poverty rate, but it's twice as high in the state's opportunity zones on average. The OZs are much more minority heavy than the state as a whole. There are, and then college attainment rates are lower. Far more adults are not working, and interestingly, housing vacancy rates are also about twice as high in opportunity zones as they are outside of OZs. And that in particular, we have some interesting strategies speaking to that itself, because it can be very hard to turn a community around when there's home prices are so low and vacancies so high that it's not economically rational to keep investing in properties in a place. You know, how do you start to break that cycle and turn a place around? Is one of the difficult questions that we try to grapple with in here. Try to sketch some solutions around, and we'll hopefully have added some value in places that really need it. So next slide, please. Now, yeah, talked about one of the key, I think, contributions of this project, we hope, on the data side, will be applying information based on the predominant land use in each individual opportunity zone in the state, thanks to that data that we obtained from IBRC, in order to help everyone better contextualize. So what are the economic development opportunities in our OZs, and what's kind of the basic nature of them, so we can calibrate our strategies around that. So the almost half of them are mixed use, which means there are a variety of applications from residential and single family, multifamily to commercial. Then about 30% are predominantly residential. And a lot of these are actually in the greater Indianapolis region. So those might require a certain set, or call for a certain set of policies or priorities, maybe ones that encourage that vacant purchasing and improving vacant single family housing, for example, or maybe make sure that there are protections in place so that an influx of investment doesn't destabilize the existing neighborhoods. Stuff like that, I think, is important nuance to take into consideration. And 16% are city centers. So these are similar to mixed use in that there are lots of different applications, but these are specific to generally the downtowns of the state's kind of large to mid-sized cities, where again, strategies I think would be customized. You might have other improvement districts or things that you can layer on top, and chances to really try to use OZ investment to maybe increase the central city's tax base or something like that. And then about 6% of OZs are rural, so these are largely agricultural areas without that clear core defined kind of urban core or town center. These are relatively well off, have low average poverty rates, but many of them are close to infrastructure assets or highways, and do have lands that might be zoned for different uses, like industrial use or what have you, where OZs can layer on top of that. So next slide, please. And then, okay, this will be over to Rachel. So I'll make one more comment on the last slide. Sorry, if we can go back. I will say in the report itself, we didn't want to bore you with too many slides here today, but we also go one step further and include a set of identified opportunity zones that are like really unique in that maybe they're part of an innovation district or adjacent to a university. So there you can see this, you can see OZs serving as a way to kind of extend the economic development impact and reach of those anchor tenants, or help build out an innovation district like Electric Works in Fort Wayne is a great example, or 16 Tech in Indianapolis is also in an opportunity zone. And then ones that are like directly adjacent to an airport, and et cetera. So we have all this data, and we'll be sure to share it with the core project teams and anyone who reaches out to us who wants it. Okay, with that, I'll go to the next slide, and I believe pass it on to Rachel.
Yeah, thanks, Kenan. So once we had a lay of the land and we understood what the dynamic was in the state, we took that quantitative and qualitative approach, had the data, spoke with local stakeholders. There were really 4 key issues that emerged from the numerous conversations as realms in which opportunity zones are primarily positioned to help further state goals. And those 4 areas are listed below. So number 1, we think OZs are well positioned to build a dynamic and resilient economy, to create livable communities, to improve resident health, and also provide quality, affordable housing. Underneath each of those headers, there's sort of these subheadings around key issue areas or local priorities. So for example, under building a dynamic and resilient economy, we know that supporting entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial ecosystems is really important to the state. And we have examples listed right there of ways in which that's already happening in the state through opportunity zones. And so going down the list one by one, you can see how we've categorized those main key areas and thematically bucketed both, you know, the existing activities that are happening as well as the broader areas where we think activity can continue to plug in. Really interestingly, I do want to point out the area around improving resident health. We took a broader focus on this around the social determinants of health. So we talk about both food deserts as well as healthcare providers. Half of opportunity zones in the Northwest region are food deserts. We know that last mile issues around getting food to low-income communities and distressed communities is a tough issue to tackle, as well as nutrition is one of the things that definitely influences resident health. And we know that a lot of the health outcomes in residence and opportunity zones in Indiana are far behind other residents in the state relative to what we'd like to see. So just wanted to note that, and we do think that opportunity zones can be helpful, and we have seen other examples of ways in which OZs has been used throughout the nation to help address that issue, which we cite in the report. Next slide. So just based on those examples that we both provide in the report, as well as the ones I just shared, what I do want to say is, like, Indiana has really stepped out of the gates and accumulated a lot of the most exciting opportunity zones initiatives and developments across the country over the course of the policy's first 2 to 3 years. Many of the investments that I've noted can really be attributed to the early efforts of the investment consortium. And based on the conversations that we've had throughout the development of the report, I'm really excited to see Purdue's Rural Opportunity Zones initiative building capacity in some of the smaller towns throughout the state. Based on the needs identified in the stakeholder interviews, we have also identified areas where we think additional capacity and attention paid could help strengthen the efforts that are currently happening and give the state a competitive advantage in attracting OZ capital where it's needed most. So there are certain areas of the state that are not receiving OZ capital despite efforts to attract that capital. And there really are 2 areas of focus that we think, if they're drilled down upon, could really bear some fruit. So number 1 is addressing knowledge gaps, and number 2 is around engaging local investors. And anecdotally, I will say that these are thematically issues that we see across the nation. This is not an Indiana specific problem. And I wouldn't even say it's a problem. I think it's just a hallmark of the maturation of the marketplace, the OZ marketplace. But given that, we do have 4 strategies that we outline in the report that we think can be employed by public and private sector leaders to help address those 2 areas. And we go into depth and we provide examples of ways that other states are addressing these 4 strategies. So number 1 is to establish a statewide opportunity zones coordinator. Number 2 is to create a centralized online directory of essential opportunity zones information. Number 3 is to enhance and align public resources to strengthen opportunity zones communities and shape the marketplace. And number 4 is to activate residents, businesses, and community stakeholders. I do want to underscore that we found that there is a local wealth base or a local network of investors that maybe don't see themselves as investors, but if primed and if engaged in the right ways, we think there could be a real interest around investing locally in the state to support projects and opportunity zones. And we go into depth in that in the report. And from here, I will turn it over to Emily Scott from LISC.
Thanks, Rachel. So hello, everyone. My name is Emily Scott, and I'm with Local Initiative Support Corporation, or LISC. We are the backbone entity for the Opportunity Investment Consortium of Indiana. LISC is a national CDFI, but we've operated here in Indianapolis for over 25 years. And as the Opportunity Zones initiative launched at a federal level, we knew that a lot of the communities that we worked in historically in kind of the urban core of Indianapolis were really poised to be designated as opportunity zones. And we really wanted to make sure that we were in a place to help leverage investment, but also build some infrastructure that could further elevate work in these communities. Next slide. So the Opportunity Investment Consortium was crafted as kind of a response to the Opportunity Zones initiative. And this was an idea that really came together with support from a lot of the public and private sector and nonprofit sector partners that are leaders in economic development and investment here in Indiana. And really the structure is intended to connect investors to capital and resources to ultimately support people and places. And so this has been, an evolving structure and opportunity, and we, have been grateful for the support of EIG and other partners along the way as we considered what this might look like. The OIC platform and portal were one of the first kind of stood up in the country early on in opportunity zones. And while there have been many others and some much more robust than ours, we sort of stepped out early with putting this together, trying to be a platform for some centralized communication resources. And it's grown to really house a lot of content that's been generated by partners, both locally and nationally, but also as a place where investors and TA providers can actually connect with projects and hopefully advance, investment in the opportunity zones throughout the state. Next slide. So a little bit about the consortium infrastructure. So there's kind of three sets of members or partners that have a kind of distinct role in the framework of the consortium. So first you have the investor members. So these include some private sector investors, but also many kind of governmental organizations that may have tax credits or other incentives that can be specifically leveraged for OZ type projects, and then as well as CDFIs, other equity funds, and that both have the ability to create an OZ fund, but then also other tools that can complement OZ funds, but also be helpful to projects that may not actually be a fit for OZ funding. Then there's also educational partners and resources. So we know that kind of statewide, the chambers of commerce, the government agencies, and other kind of nonprofit organizations are poised to help communities respond to the Opportunity Zones initiative to help deliver content, because we all know that it's a very complicated topic, and to kind of help build the market for the investment in individual geographies and neighborhoods. And then professional service provider members that are either legal or accounting or other kind of private sector experts that can, really help an individual investor or an individual developer understand how, OZs fit into their project, or to understand how to navigate the regulations. And so those members have been very crucial to helping individuals understand the opportunity that is very complicated, and they've really been an important piece of some of the TA workshops and other events that we've had in the past to really help kind of dive deep into what is this and how do we leverage it. And then kind of finally, there's a kind of a backbone layer that includes LISC, as I said earlier, but then also the state, the Indy Chamber, the Indiana Bond Bank, IADC, OCRA, IHCDA, and others that have really kind of met on a quarterly basis and more frequently at the outset to really kind of steer the direction of the portal, as many of these organizations have a statewide reach where many of the opportunity zones are located. Next slide. So the consortium has kind of at its core a website that has been leveraged both for its ability to house a portal that is really kind of a deal flow structure that was created to help connect possible projects with investors. And so there's actually a tool on the website where you as a developer could enter your project, or a business owner could enter your project and essentially provide some high level description of what it is you're looking for from an investment standpoint. And then that in turn gets distributed to the accredited investor members of the consortium, who can then look for the right tool in their toolkit to, whether it's OZ funds or some other type of debt or equity or grant program that might be a fit for that project. We also have tried to, aggregate a lot of the great work done by many of our partners, including EIG and federal agencies, any announcements that are coming out, but also highlighting projects at a local level to really help to spread the word on what exists in this space. And then I guess the final thing that the consortium has really tried to do, not as much this year, but at the outset really tried to host events and networking opportunities to help educate, the potential beneficiaries and of the program to understand how, how they might leverage opportunity zones in their community, build base level understanding, and figure out how to navigate the process. And so we, at the outset, we did have, some high profile folks from the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, but also a lot of statewide partners to, share their vantage point on the initiative, but also, speak about their aligned programs to kind of help advance this work. Next slide. So I mentioned the deal profile a little bit ago, and the deal portal a little bit ago. And since the consortium was stood up in the last 2 years, we've received, this is kind of a breakdown of the asset class of the types of projects that have come through the consortium portal. And it was interesting, as Kenan mentioned earlier, that quite a few of the opportunity zones, the opportunity for kind of typology in those areas, a lot of it was mixed use and residential. And similarly, a lot of the projects that have come through the consortium portal have been mixed use or multifamily. There has been, also a number of industrial projects and small business as well. I think some of the projects that have been submitted through the portal also have kind of multidimensional components. So it may be a large anchor site that might include both multifamily, but also some small business components too. And I think an important thing to note too is that while a majority of, there are a larger number of opportunity zones in central Indiana, as you'd seen on the map earlier, we have seen projects come in from throughout the state. So we're glad to know that that it is getting a wide reach and continue to see participation from developers and investors from throughout the state. Next slide. So I think it's been an interesting time to kind of navigate this, and I think the consortium is at a spot right now where we're sort of evaluating what comes next, what are some of the lessons learned. And I think the piece that has kind of been resounding to a lot of us and is actually, affirmed by some of the points that Rachel suggested around having a statewide opportunity coordinator, some additional kind of technical assistance to help advance some of the deals, is that a lot of the projects that we're seeing through the consortium are projects that actually probably aren't necessarily a great fit for an opportunity zone fund, or they need a little bit more technical assistance or pre-development work before they're really kind of shovel-ready projects. And so we're trying to look at ways as a consortium and the members of the consortium to think about how we might be able to provide more technical assistance to the projects that are coming through that aren't quite investment ready, to see if we can help get those to the finish line. And then I think too, we're trying to understand further of how the consortium can help leverage federal grant programs that give preference points for opportunity zones. So while, the primary and well-known and I guess opportunity zone, opportunity fund investment, intent is there, there are more than 150 federal agencies that provide preference points for projects and opportunity zones. So how do we help communities, access grant programs and other TA programs that are not related to real estate investment, but might be related to, job training initiatives or small business initiatives or housing initiatives that might be more programmatic and can benefit from that designation as an opportunity zone without necessarily being focused on investment. And then another thing that some of our consortium members have been talking a lot about recently is how do we, as a group, try to provide more technical assistance to smaller investors so that they can actually invest in projects in their communities. So I think it's as we all know, it's a very complicated federal program, and it's not necessarily super accessible to very small scale investors. And so is there a way to help provide support or technical assistance to investors that might have some really great projects in their own communities that they want to invest in, but maybe don't have the investment skill set or background to jump right into it. So, and then we're also just exploring modifications to the backbone structure and the staffing structure so that we can be more proactive and responsive to some of these statewide opportunities. So we know that there's a lot more work to be done, and our partnerships with a lot of the organizations earlier mentioned are crucial to that. And I think, as Rachel mentioned, the Purdue Rural Opportunity Zones Initiative is another a great partner that's doing a lot of boots on the ground work in other parts of the state. So, so I think that's kind of where we are looking ahead. And I think now I'm going to hand it off to Matt Gaddis with House Investments to talk about one of the projects that actually came through the portal earlier this year. If you have any questions, feel free to visit the Opportunity Investment Consortium website and explore the resources and the deal portal when you get a chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. As Emily said, I'm here today to talk about the Forge on Main, which is a project that we put through the portal earlier this year. And for those of you who don't know, a little bit of background on House Investments. House Investments has been around since 1978. Since our inception, we've really had experience in nearly every aspect of real estate investment, with a focus on owning, developing, and managing multifamily assets, mainly in the state of Indiana. Next slide, please. Here to talk about the Forge on Main. This is a project that is located in the Jacobsville area of Evansville, which, if you're familiar with Evansville, or even if you're not, it's just north of downtown Evansville and just north of the Lloyd Expressway there. This project, it's an urban infill mixed-use project that consists of 180 workforce housing apartments and approximately 16,000 square feet of commercial space. Workforce housing has a lot of different meanings depending on who you're talking to. It's kind of got a wide definition. For us, that is that we're targeting households between 60 and 120% of area median income. This specific project, 10% of the 180 units, so 18 units, will focus and target 60% of the area median income rents in Vanderburgh County, and the remaining, so the remaining 90% of the units, we're targeting 70 to 100% AMI rents. And really, in this area of Evansville, that is market rate, but it is hits those workforce housing thresholds. This development, total development cost is $28 million. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give you just a little brief detail and background on the site and why we selected the site. As you can see, here's an overview shot. It's an entire city block, so just over 3 acres altogether. So when we purchased the ground, there were 2 existing commercial buildings that were both vacant. One was a former grocery store that went out of business in 2017. And then there was a separate metalwork shop that really hasn't been in business for several years now. Next slide, please. So here's an overview of our site layout for the project. Given it's an urban infill, We're surrounding the site with 4 buildings. The building that looks like a backwards L there, that is the mixed use building. So that's got the commercial space and amenity space. That's a 4-story structure. And that street on the right there of that building, that is Main Street. I will talk about that here on the next slide. It is one of the reasons that we like this site and wanted to move forward with this project. But the other 3 buildings on the site, they're 3-story walk-up apartments, and then we got parking in the center there. Next slide, please. So why this site, and specifically Jacobsville? This site is located in a federal promise zone, and that designation was received in 2016. And really, the promise zone designation is that it's high poverty, low income. And then one of the reasons this was designated a promise zone is in 2004, this area of Evansville and Jacobsville was designated as an EPA Superfund site, really for contaminated soil throughout the area with arsenic and lead. And this site that we selected is actually believed to be one of the original sources of that contamination, as it was an old, prior to being a grocery store back in the late 1800s through about 1960, it was a metal fabrication site that worked on plows. So, although that might not seem, being designated federal promise zone and Superfund site as opportunity, for us, it was an opportunity to make an impact in the neighborhood and in the community. Next, Main Street revitalization. The city of Evansville has really been focusing on the Jacobsville area and how to attract additional development. And so in 2017, the city of Evansville spent about $15 million on the Main Street revitalization. They completely redid the infrastructure, added a biking and walking path that really goes all the way from the north end of downtown Evansville all the way north to a park called Garvin Park on the north side of Jacobsville. So that investment by the city, we wanted to be that next outside investor to one, have the neighborhood impact, but 2, we truly felt like the area was ripe for an investment into the community because of what the city had done from the Main Street revitalization standpoint. Also, the community and city support. As I said, the city is very pro-development. The Jacobsville area neighborhood is welcoming of any and all developments, both from a financial aspect to help get projects done, but ultimately just easy to work with. It's been a great experience, and they're wanting to turn around that area and spur development, and so they've been able to do that just by being supportive of the project. As I mentioned earlier, neighborhood impact. The city of Evansville and Deaconess Hospital, they're putting a $20 million aquatic center at the north end of this Main Street revitalization. And so really we thought, there was no south anchor for the Jacobsville area. And we view this project as a south anchor that will spur additional investment, and we're excited to be a long-term partner in that area. And obviously it's opportunity zone. We were actively looking at opportunity zone potential projects, and so the fact that this site sat in an opportunity zone, we had investors that had capital events that were looking to put their money into opportunity zone project. So that helped us, when we're going looking at sites, ultimately make a decision that this was a good fit for us in this project. And it's going off what Rachel said earlier, kind of the four things as far as delivering opportunity. This site it's creating livable communities. It's part of the Main Street revitalization brownfield remediation, and reducing, really distressed commercial properties that were vacant. So we're eliminating blight in the process. And then we're also providing quality, affordable housing, even though it's, we're targeting the workforce housing level, so it's not truly affordable. It's a need in Evansville and really across the state of Indiana. And also, really one of the main things we liked about this was, even though for all the issues that Jacobsville has, there are 3 major employers within a half mile of this site. And, the workforce at those employers, there's no place for them currently to live in the neighborhood to where they can give that live, work, play aspect, which a lot of people are looking for these days. With the area being a promise zone, there's been a lot of LIHTC deals done over the past couple of years and awarded, but really no workforce or market rate housing opportunities. So really, we're excited about providing a new type of housing into an area that had, in the past, has had trouble attracting market rate or workforce housing developments. Next slide, please. So funding sources. This project, it's got quite the capital stack. These type of projects, given the workforce housing targets, you're not getting $1.75 or $2 a square foot like you are in some other areas of the state. So you really have to have a capital stack that works, and that's really got a lot of soft funding. And this goes back to talking about how the community and city support really went a long way in making this project feasible. As you'll see here, we had a local foundation grant of $750,000. That is a local foundation that's wanting to have an impact in the community, and specifically in Jacobsville. The city of Evansville provided $1.5 million in TIF bond proceeds. In addition, it's not listed here, but they also provided a 10-year property tax abatement on the property. And then, we did have, as far as private investment, $4.5 million worth of private investment. Of that $4.5 million, $4 million is an opportunity zone capital. The other $500,000 was, once again, a local community-minded investor who really wanted to have an impact in his own backyard, per se. And of that $4 million of OZ capital, a portion of that was raised through the Opportunity Zone Consortium of Indiana, because we did put this project on there. The other, just running down here, Green Infrastructure Grant of $600,000. We were able to secure redevelopment tax credits through the IEDC and state of Indiana of $3.4 million. And then we have traditional bank financing of just over $17 million. So as you'll see, it's a complex capital stack, but it's one that was needed in order to get this project off the ground. Next slide, please. So the impact of the Opportunity Zone, how it impacted us and our mindsets going into this project. The big thing is site selection. We were actively looking for an Opportunity Zone project, and part of that reason was access to capital. As I mentioned earlier, we had investors who were looking for Opportunity Zone investments because they had capital events. So it provides a unique access to capital. I'd say one of the challenges we ran into early on is, as mentioned earlier, is the education piece of it. The investors have to be sophisticated, and either they already know about it, or you have to educate the investors on Opportunity Zones and how it can benefit their investment and their return from that standpoint. And we had to do a little bit of that on this project. Is some really had no idea on opportunity zones. Others were, experienced enough that they knew what they were. And, put on here again, Opportunity Investment Consortium of Indiana. We had a good problem to have. We put it on the portal, and we got some interest from, and further discussion started from being on the portal. By the time we got the investor from the portal interested enough to want to actually put money in the project, we were close to being fully subscribed. So it was a small chunk of that OZ capital, but the investor wanted to put in more. So it was a good experience, and as I said earlier, it was a good problem for us to have. But there are active investors who really want to make an impact in Indiana. And then lastly, really boost the return. We've learned, we've been looking at opportunity zone deals now for almost 3 years, ever since they changed in 2017 when the tax code changed and included opportunity zones. And really what it does is it boosts the return. It does not make a project that doesn't work. It really takes a project that works or is close to working on paper and really boosts that return to make it a feasible project from an investment standpoint. In closing, I'd like to thank both EIG, LISC, and the Opportunity Investment Consortium of Indiana for having us on, talking about our project. We had a great experience through the consortium. Once we get the next Opportunity Zone project, we'll look at putting it on there as well. But I'd highly encourage anyone to get it out there, start that discussion, and I have no doubt that you'll be successful with that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Matt. And one of the things I do want to underscore is that you had investment into the Opportunity Fund for your project, but it wasn't Opportunity Zone eligible capital. It was just a local investor who wanted their money to help benefit the community, strengthen the community. And what I think is really powerful about that, my background's in impact investing, is that there really, prior to Opportunity Zones, hadn't been a vehicle for local investors to place capital directly into projects and have sort of like a third-party fund manager manage that capital. And so I think, one of the nice byproducts of Opportunity Zones has been it's lowered the barrier for local investment. So I'm just really excited about that, just as far as like a field building or ecosystem building for local investment. So thank you all for presenting. We've done, and I will say Emily specifically has done a wonderful job monitoring the Q&A box and answering all the questions. So I don't think we have any outstanding questions. And so with 1 minute left, maybe I'll just turn it over to folks with any final thoughts, concluding statements. Kenan, I see you've popped back up, so maybe you want to say something.
Sure. I'll say something. Although I just popped up, so you weren't alone as a web. Yeah. Anyway, but no. To your point about local capital, I think that's right. So and we saw this in the Brookville, Indiana case study that LISC and the Opportunity Investment Consortium published. Right. That the two local business owners ended up selling their firm, and then were looking for something meaningful to do with the proceeds, and Opportunity Zones were there. And I don't believe we have the counterfactual. We don't know whether or not they would have invested locally without OZs, but the fact that they were aware of OZs and it was a vehicle meant that they were able to take kind of all that capital accumulation and wealth, or at least a good chunk of it, and channel it back into purchasing the local newspaper, revitalizing Main Street, starting investing in a hotel in an area that wants to build a tourism economy and all. So I think the boosting of the returns is complemented by the attracting of new capital to this space to do more than was done prior, which is great, because especially in a community like even Jacobsville or Evansville, there's no kind of extra. It's not a bountiful investment environment when you're looking to make these projects pencil out and all. So bringing more people. I think when we hear from folks, even who participated in OZs or got to learn a lot about them early on, but maybe didn't invest in them themselves down the road. They said that the conversation has been super important by bringing people together from tons of different communities and stakeholders just to learn about this and to look at their communities in a new kind of asset focused, like what's possible here, light rather than a deficit focused one. People, OZs have so far succeeded in helping folks, even if they're not going to make an OZ investment, look at the map differently of their communities and of where they can put their money and where they can be more impactful with it. So I wanted to just tie it up a little with that. But yeah, thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, and the only other thing I'll say, because I could wax poetic about Brookville all day long, honestly, is the very cool thing about Brookville is that, you know, you talked about counterfactual, maybe the Welch family would have invested locally anyways, but their third fund got additional folks locally to invest, right? And so it's sort of that aggregated capital effect that I think is super interesting, and that I don't know would have happened but for opportunity zones. And I will say I am a Brookville convert. When I was in Cincinnati over the summer, I hopped in my car and went and drove to Brookville because I just had to see it for myself. So I really enjoyed the town. And with that, I think we will close it out. We're about 2 minutes over, and just want to thank our partners and on this project. Thank everyone who we spoke to during the development of the report. We really enjoyed our conversations with you. And want to, of course, thank our wonderful guest speakers. Their contact information is right there if you guys need to get a hold of them. And yeah, hope everyone has a good day. Go check out the report and let us know if you have any questions.